What is going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. So one of the main talking points following Game 5 of the Stanley Cup Final after his 2-goal performance was, of course, Brad Marchand, considering the fact that he has 6 goals in these Stanley Cup Finals, might end up winning the Conn Smythe for the Florida Panthers if they win the Stanley Cup, and the fact that the Boston Bruins traded him for a conditional second-round pick that did turn into a first-round pick at the trade deadline. It's viewed as one of the greatest trade deadline moves of all time, and I would agree with that at this point, but I thought it'd be a fun idea to look at every single big trade deadline move at this year's deadline and kind of see how they aged. How did those guys perform in the regular season and in the playoffs? Are certain guys going to leave in the offseason, leave in free agency for absolutely nothing, or did they get some kind of extension done? So we're going to look at it from both the buyer as well as the seller's perspective. At the start of the second round, I did a tier list only looking at the buyer's perspective, but we're going to assign some grades to these trades. So yeah, let's dive into it. Let's not waste any time. And some of these trades, I basically compressed into like a 3-team or a 4-team one. For example, Mikko Rantanen and Miller, because there was moving parts in the first trade that also got traded in a second trade. You'll get what I'm saying, because we're starting out with the Mikko Rantanen deal. I included the Chicago Blackhawks in this because they did trade Taylor Hall and retained on Mikko Rantanen. I give them a B+. Got their own third-round pick back, so pretty solid there using your salary cap space, and Taylor Hall didn't really have a future with the team. Colorado, I'm going with the C, especially now that Martin Nyquist, according to reports, might not be happy in Colorado. I don't know what is going to make him happy besides, at this point, is going to make him happy considering the fact that he's riding shotgun with Nathan MacKinnon. He was pretty good for them, but again, they lost in the first round. He has one more year at 6.5 and then is going to want some big contract if he is going to stay in Colorado. Drury's okay, and they got a second and a fourth-round pick, which I think they eventually flipped that second-round pick. So yeah, I think a C is pretty fair for them, especially with that new news regarding Nyquist. For the Carolina Hurricanes, they swung big on Rantanen. It didn't work out. It happens, but the fact that they were able to turn that around and get Stankoven, as well as getting Taylor Hall in the initial deal, I feel like that goes unnoticed, considering the fact that he was a very effective middle sixer, 18 points in 31 games in the regular season for them. Now he's locked up on a 3-year deal at $3.1 million, as well as 2 first-round picks. It is from Dallas. I don't expect those picks to be very high, but they are solid assets that you can use at future trade deadlines or in this year's offseason, as well as 2 third-round picks. So yeah, now they have a lot of flexibility heading into this offseason, in part because of this trade. And they went just as far as the Dallas Stars. They made Game 5 of the conference final. Obviously, Dallas is a better team than Carolina. But yeah, going forward, their window lengthened by this kind of move instead of going for it and maybe coming up short like the Dallas Stars did. But I still give the Dallas Stars an A- because Mikko Rantanen is still the best player in this deal. And I think going forward, he is going to be a very effective superstar that Dallas is going to need. They locked him up on an 8-year deal at $12 million, which is perfectly solid given his pedigree. So yeah, I think Dallas still is the winner. Carolina, we could say in 5 to 7 years that this was a masterclass if they trade those picks or draft fantastic. But right now, I think you've got to say that Dallas probably won this the most, considering we saw Mikko Rantanen, although it wasn't the most consistent playoffs. He can potentially be that true superstar that maybe could get Dallas over the hump, even though as a result of this trade, now they're pretty cap tight this summer. But I think that these grades are pretty fair right now. Next up, the Calgary and Philadelphia Frost, Faraby, and Kuzmenko deal. I was shocked when I looked up Frost and Faraby's stat lines with the Calgary Flames. Frost has 12 points in 32 games, which you might think is pretty bad. Faraby has 3 goals, 3 assists, 6 points in 31 games. I had to tweet it out. I was so shocked. So these guys have not been good for Calgary. Maybe they're unlucky. I think they are going to bounce back to a degree. They're in their mid-20s. They have had prior seasons of being 40 to 50-point guys. But I still don't like this trade for the Calgary Flames. I said it in the moment. I didn't like it in the moment because it was just going to keep the Calgary Flames perfectly mid. They're okay, solid middle sixers. But at this point, Faraby's 25, Frost is 26. They're not really going to turn into anything special. So they're just going to keep Calgary a 90 to 95 point team next year. So I wasn't that big on it. And you're giving up a second round pick. And for Philadelphia, they eventually flipped Kuzmenko, who we'll talk about later. Peltier looks like he can, I don't know, be like in the bottom 6 or something like that. They got a second round pick, which is decently valuable, and a 7th round pick. And for Philadelphia, they did the opposite of Calgary. They basically punted on the season. They sucked down the stretch. And now, as a result, they're selecting 6th overall instead of, if they kept those guys, maybe, not saying those guys put the team on their back, but maybe they're selecting 8th, 9th, 10th, or something like that, and outside of the range of potentially getting a future franchise number 1 center. So for Philadelphia, I think an A- makes a lot of sense. For Calgary, C- right now. The New York Rangers, the JT Miller trade, I gave him a B- in the moment. I'm sticking to that now. On its face value, JT Miller for the 12th overall pick is solid, good even. But for the New York Rangers that didn't really need another center, didn't really need a forward at all, needed definitely more so defensive help. I didn't like it in the moment. They missed the playoffs as a result. For Vancouver, yeah, it doesn't look that good considering what that New York Rangers pick turned into, it being 12th overall. And yes, they could opt to keep this pick and then go into 2026 unprotected with the Pittsburgh Penguins. But for Vancouver, considering their team was just a total shit show mess, I still think Marcus Pettersson is one of the best number 3 defensemen in the NHL. But for the 12th overall, that is far too much to give up, and Hedl is just far too injury prone. Mancini's an okay depth defenseman. But for Pittsburgh, you gotta love it. A+. Marcus Pettersson, you thought coming into the deadline that he would get you a late first-round pick, maybe a third-round pick as well. He might get you the 12th overall pick if they decide to send it to you this year. You picked up a bunch of depth contracts from the Vancouver Canucks. Fantastic job by Kyle Dubas getting that pick. So yeah, B-, C-, A+ for the Pittsburgh Penguins. For the Dallas Stars, the Granlund trade, I'm going to go with the B. Again, Granlund had a hat trick against Winnipeg Jets, basically single-handedly won them that game. He was solid throughout the playoffs. It's more so a B because of Cody Ceci. Cody Ceci was Jim Nill's one move in terms of right-handed defense, and clearly he wasn't remotely good enough, even though he played like 21 minutes a night. That's how desperate they were. He was satisfied with just getting Cody Ceci, so it kind of sucks from that perspective that them trading for Cody Ceci stopped them from getting another right-handed defenseman. And yeah, at the end of the day, they lost in 5 games to the Edmonton Oilers, which was disappointing. And for San Jose, considering they had no retention spots, being able to move off Granlund in Ceci, not retaining a single cent because Dallas obviously had the Tyler Seguin money, and then eventually the Miro Heiskanen money, the fact they were able to move off that for a first and a 4th-round pick, fantastic value by Mike Guerriere in the San Jose Sharks. If Granlund resigns, it definitely goes up to a B+ or an A-, but right now they really don't have the money to resign him. But we'll see what happens. Ryan Lingren to the Colorado Avalanche. It's a positive New York Ranger. I'm not just trashing the New York Rangers on this. This was amazing by the New York Rangers. Ryan Lingren he just physically broke down the last couple of years. He's a warrior, but it just took such a toll on his body. And at this point, he was just an objectively bad defenseman. So they got a 2nd and a 4th-round pick, as well as Parson Ian, who's an okay young bottom 6 forward. Not saying he's anything special, but more so that 2nd-round pick. Colorado got Ryan Lingren, who had like a 45% expected goals percentage for them. He actively hurt the team in the playoffs, and especially in that Game 7 against Dallas, was defending Mikko Rantanen on like 2 of those goals. And Jimmy Vesey's not really a needle mover at all, so D- for the Colorado Avalanche. And after they re-signed Brock Nelson, we'll talk about shortly, they're definitely not keeping Ryan Lingren, so he was a rental. And again, probably actively hurt the team this season. Gustav Nyquist, Minnesota got him. He had 0 points in 6 playoff games, as well as only having 6 points in 22 regular season games. So for Minnesota, brutal deal. For Nashville, you might say, oh, if he played so bad, why are you not giving them an A+? They probably should have traded Nyquist like back in December or January when he still had some hype coming from his like 75-point season the year prior. The fact that they waited so long to trade him when they were like out of the playoffs by like mid-December, they should have been more aggressive in that. Not saying they would have gotten a 1st-round pick, but you probably could have netted a 2nd and a 3rd if you traded him early January or something like that. You were so far out of the playoffs. He was a valuable rental piece. You should have moved him quicker. But Minnesota, this was a shit move. You should have just done nothing, especially considering Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson were hurt. The Seth Jones trade. Big time win-win for both clubs, in my opinion. Some people might scream it should be an A+ because they're going to win the Stanley Cup. Just because you win the Stanley Cup, I'm not going to say your deal's automatically an A+, but still, it's great. And also, Seth Jones, you acquired him. Now you might be able to let Aaron Ekblad walk. But yeah, $7 million, you got some serious retention on him. Still getting paid a decent amount. It did cost you a decent amount in Spencer Knight and a 2026 first-round pick. But again, he has been great on their team, especially in that Game 7 against the Toronto Maple Leafs. He was the best player on the ice. He's been very good for them. But again, I can't go an A+ because they gave up a 1st in their young potential future franchise goaltender, and they're still paying him $7 million. It's not like they got the retention down to 6, 5.5 or something like that. Still, great work by Bill Zito. And for Chicago, again, hopefully Spencer Knight can at least turn into like a 1B of your future, maybe even a 1A, and you get a 1st-round pick, even though, again, I don't expect the Florida Panthers to stink next year by any stretch. But still, they got a decent price. And it was well worth retaining $2.5 million for. Next up, Trent Frederick. D plus, again, some people might scream, the Edmonton Oilers are in the Stanley Cup final. How can this be a D plus? Trent Frederick's not the reason why this team's in the Stanley Cup finals right now. They took a swing on him. He was coming off an injury and was just playing straight up bad before that. Had 15 points in about 60 games. In the playoffs, only has 4 points in 21 games, only playing around 11 minutes a night. You give up the second round pick, not even your own second round pick, St. Louis's, from funny enough, the Broberg offer sheet, as well as a 4th round pick. Awesome work by the Boston Bruins, who didn't really have any plans to re-sign him at this point. And yeah, you're just thinking about the future if you're Boston. For Edmonton, maybe he goes off in these next 2 games and I look like an absolute idiot, but he's definitely not one of the main reasons why the Edmonton Oilers are in the Stanley Cup Finals. We can all agree on that. So as a result, I think a D plus is fair for the Frederick trade. This was a big one. Gourd, Bjorkstrand. I'm actually going to go with, it might be a B minus. I'm not going to lie now that I look at it, because they gave up 2 first-round picks. First off, Seattle. Ron Francis makes some dumb free agency signings, but he had a pretty damn good deadline when he decided to sell. 2 first-round picks. Tampa in 2027, we don't know how good they'll be considering they're so old at this point. So I think it's an A plus for them. Gourd, they weren't going to re-sign at 33, 34 years old with the amount of centers that they have up and coming. Bjorkstrand, it did have a lot of value, but again, you could say one of those firsts is for Gourd, a first and a second for Bjorkstrand. You take that every day of the week, considering you're a 76-point team and he's 28, 29 years old. Detroit, A minus, retained some money on Gourd. Got a 4th round pick. Solid work by Steve Yzerman once they were kind of out of the playoff picture. And for Tampa Bay, yeah, I think the fact that they re-signed Gourd definitely makes it more palatable. I think I would go with a B minus though at this point, just because this season, again, they did lose to the Florida Panthers. I know that Bjorkstrand didn't play, but they lost in 5 games. So for this perspective, already a year burnt. You don't know if Bjorkstrand after this season is going to stay with the team. The Gourd deal is funny as hell, 6 years, $2.33 million. But yeah, I think I'm going to go with the B minus again, just because this was more so for this year and it didn't quite work out. They also have more years after this. But a B minus. It's not some kind of disaster, but they gave up a shit ton. Don't get me wrong. This was a really interesting kind of like de facto 3-team trade. Nashville traded Novak and Shen for Bunting and a 4th. I don't understand that, considering the fact they could have just traded Shen on their own. And Novak, in my opinion, is better than Bunting at this point, and they got a 4th round pick. So I didn't like that from Nashville's perspective. Then Pittsburgh goes out and trades Shen for a 2nd and a 4th round pick. So they basically traded Novak. They basically traded Bunting. They basically traded Bunting for Novak in a 2nd round pick, which was awesome work by Kyle Dubas. Not the largest scale deal, but awesome work by him. And as a result, he gets an A minus. And for the Winnipeg Jets, Shen was an okay. That should probably be a C or C minus. Now that I think about it, like Shen's their number 6 defenseman, making a healthy $2.75 million this season and next. But they only gave up a 2nd round pay. I'll go with the C minus. Yeah, that should be down to a C minus. Maybe I made a mistake on that. Another kind of 3-teamer, the Riley Smith, Carson Soucy, 3rd round pick one. The New York Rangers first trade away Riley Smith for the San Jose 3rd round pick. I was like, okay, that's pretty damn good for the New York Rangers. Pick up an asset, think more so towards the future. But then they flipped that for Carson Soucy, which is a little bit weird. Soucy has another year at $3.25 million. Was pretty goddamn bad this season, if we're going to be honest. Vancouver Canucks fans will tell you that firsthand. He was good in 2024, but at this point is 31 years old. So for Vegas, A minus. Riley Smith, again, didn't go on some Stanley Cup run, but made it to the 2nd round. Riley Smith had that game-winning goal against the Edmonton Oilers. He was an effective middle 6 forward, and they only gave up, the 65th overall selection. For New York, though, adding someone that has another year at term and is now in their 30s, coming off a bad season, I can't really endorse that. And for Vancouver, they didn't really, and Brendan Marchand doesn't really have that much value considering he's not really killing it at the AHL level and was like a 2020 draftee. Vancouver, yeah, A minus. You get an earliest possible 3rd round pick for Carson Soucy. You make some room for potential defenseman ads or Elias Pettersson and Tom Willander full-time. Elias Pettersson, the other Elias Pettersson, that is. In terms of their defense core, good work by Patrick Alvin. Should have also traded Brock Besser, though. Next up, my favorite deal at deadline, the Colorado and New York Islanders. Brock Nelson deal. For Colorado, they did re-sign Brock Nelson. This would be like a D plus if they didn't, considering the fact that Nelson went goalless against the Dallas Stars, but they re-signed him. I don't love that extension, 3 years, $7.5 million for a 34-year-old that had his worst regular season in the past 4 seasons, but still, he's going to be a second-line center at the bare minimum next season, and that has been a gaping hole for them. Still, from a New York Islanders perspective, the Colorado Avalanche gave up way too much to the New York Islanders. Cal Ritchie immediately becomes, right now, until they draft Matthew Schaefer, obviously, or Michael Misa, their 1A, 1B top prospect in the pool alongside Cole Eisman. He was the number 1 prospect for the Colorado Avalanche, as well as a 2026 first-round pick. It was a hefty, hefty price. It did not result in success this year. Maybe in the next 2 years they can win with Nelson as a second-line center, but it's not like Nelson's this 29-year-old that they're going to lock up, that they locked up long-term and are going to have multiple runs with him. This was definitely a strong overpayment by the Colorado Avalanche. Next up, Jake Walman in the San Jose Sharks. Jake Walman has been very good. Maybe not the best Stanley Cup final, but he's been very good for the Edmonton Oilers, especially in the playoffs. He has their highest expected goals percentage at 59% at 5-on-5. So yeah, you pick him up, $3.4 million this season as well as next season, which is a key part. Yeah, he's been damn good for them. In San Jose, again, no retention spots, able to dump off a guy for a first-round pick. The overall Jake Walman experience, no doubt, is an A+++++. This individual trade, I'll give an A-. I was certain that Jake Walman, if he got traded at this year's deadline, was going to get a first-round pick. Some people were shocked. I wasn't too shocked considering he was playing 23 minutes a night and was putting up 45-point pace and actually had strong analytics and was pretty damn cheap. So yeah, A- is all around. The Washington Capitals, when they traded for Anthony Bolvillier, he was very good for them in the first round, 5 points in 5 games. Everybody went cold in the second round for the Washington Capitals. So yeah, he gave up a late second round pick to get a guy that was okay come playoff time. I can't really kill them for that. B+, maybe even a B. And for Pittsburgh, you get a second round pick for a guy that you really had no intentions on re-signing to some kind of 3-year, $3 to $4 million contract that he's probably going to get this summer. So yeah, pretty damn good by Pittsburgh. The Los Angeles Kings getting Kuzmenko. This was awesome for them when looking at the fact that Kuzmenko had 16 points in the regular season for them, as well as 6 points in 6 games against the Edmonton Oilers. So that's an A+ when you only give up a third-round pick. For Philadelphia, again, they took him on as a net negative asset from the Calgary Flames. He only played 7 games, so they weren't able to rebound his value. And then you ship him out for a third-round pick. You're not killing Philadelphia for that, even though LA definitely won this trade by a decent amount, so B- for them. The Dylan Cousins trade and the Josh Norris trade, I still really like this for Ottawa. In the moment, I saw them kind of as equals, but you add on a 2026 second-round pick going to Ottawa, which Buffalo probably not going to be a playoff team next year, so that pick could be 40th through 44th overall, most likely. That's awesome by the Ottawa Senators, and especially given the availability of the two players, Dylan Cousins has more value. Dylan Cousins had 16 points in 21 games in the regular season. Wasn't amazing in the playoffs, but going forward, you can rely on him to play north of 75 games and be probably an effective 50-ish point guy versus Josh Norris. Got hurt 3 games in, and as a result, I'm giving the Buffalo Sabres a C. I think when they're both healthy, I might even take Norris a little bit more, but considering that second-round pick, considering the health history of these two guys, I think Ottawa is the clear winner right now, but a lot could potentially change regarding this trade. And next up, Brandon Tanev to the Winnipeg Jets. Yeah, Tanev didn't score a single point for the Winnipeg Jets in their playoff run. You gave up a second-round pick, not saying it's some kind of thing of massive value, but it did suck to a decent degree. And for Seattle, you have a bunch of young forwards coming up. Take the second-round pick. Next up to Charlie Coyle for Casey Middlestat, Will Zellers in a second-round pick trade. I absolutely hated this for the Colorado Avalanche in the moment, and it definitely looks worse now considering Colorado lost in the first round. Charlie Coyle was solid for them in the regular season. He had 13 points in 19 games, but 1 point in 7 games against the Dallas Stars, a 20% goals percentage at 5-on-5, and a minus 9.6% relative expected goals percentage. He has another year at $5.25 million. I don't think that he's worth that even as your third-round pick, even though I agree that he is a better fit for a third-line center than a Casey Middlestat. Casey Middlestat's still a year removed from 2 seasons of high 50s points. Will Zellers was the leading goal scorer in the USHL by a decent amount. And you get a second-round pick on top of that. Awesome, awesome trade by the Boston Bruins, who really had... Charlie Coyle wasn't a part of their long-term plan. They got a guy that I think is going to rebound to be at least a 45-ish point guy now that he's not going to have as much pressure on him in Colorado, more free-flowing, as well as Will Zellers can maybe turn into something. And that second-round pick is from the Carolina Hurricanes from the Mikko Rantanen trade. It's not that high, but still another asset to add. For the Boston Bruins, next up, the Scott Laughton trade. This one has not looked that good for the Toronto Maple Leafs. I'm going to go with the C-. Scott Laughton, 2 points versus the Ottawa Senators and a goose egg against Florida Panthers. 4 points in 20 games in the regular season. Nothing really special defensively. He got caved in against the Panthers with like a 35% expected goals percentage. He gave up a first-round pick, gave up a Gerbenkin as well. You got a 4th and a 6th back. And he does have another year at 1.5, so I can't kill it completely. It can't be a D- D or something like that, because I think he will be better next year, fully getting acclimated to the Craig Berube system. But yeah, it's not looking that good. Gerbenkin, I'm not saying he's anything special, but I think he's going to be a solid bottom sixer in Philadelphia. Definitely fits the Philly identity. Then we get to the Brad Marchand deal, of course. A plus, 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 plus. Boston, I'm going to go with the B, though. When you look at the actual context of the situation, Brad Marchand said he only wanted to go to the Florida Panthers. He was hurt at the time. He wasn't going to go anywhere else. They got a conditional second. It ended up hitting. They got a first-round pick. But for the Florida Panthers, as I've talked about it before, one of the best trade deadline deals of all time, considering you might win. Jaquan Smythe. We got one more, though. The last deal of deadline day. Brandon Carlo to the Toronto Maple Leafs. B-. Carlo didn't have the best playoffs overall, especially against the Florida Panthers, but still I think is an effective second pair right-handed defenseman, which was kind of a need for the Toronto Maple Leafs. They gave up a decent amount of 2026 first and fourth, as well as Fraser Midden, which if you're Boston, you're absolutely loving that right now. But Carlo has 2 more years at only like $3.6 million because they got a little bit of retention on him. I can't kill him for that. For Scott Laughton, you expected some, not massive difference maker, but you expected some offense in that Florida series. Carlo is just more so of a lockdown, shutdown, right-handed defenseman, and I think that he is going to be a pretty solid fit next year for the Toronto Maple Leafs, and again, has 2 years left, where Scott Laughton, I think, after next season is probably going to leave. But yeah, those are my updated trade deadline grades. That was fun to rip through. Let me know in the comments, which ones do you agree with? Which ones do you think I'm absolutely out of my mind? I'll be seeing the next one. Peace.